Welcome to the This Week in Golf podcast. And this week we'll be covering the PGA and LIV. See where the state of everybody is at. So let's start with the PGA Tour. And the PGA Tour just wrapped up the Zurich Classic, which was the two-man event in Louisiana, New Orleans. And this format is pretty different. It's the only two-man format on the tour that the tour runs. And it is Thursday, best ball. Friday, switch shots. What do they call that? Every other shot. Forget the name. Saturday best ball. And then Sunday, alternate shot. Alternate shot is what it is. So the winners of that tournament was Nick Hardy and Davis Riley. And not only did they win the tournament, but they set a tournament record of 30 under par. The previous record was 28 under par. They put up a score of 30 under par, and very impressive one as well, because for the most part on the best ball is when most of these teams are making the best scores, and then on the days of alternate shots they're a few under par, but not as much. But Nick Hardy and Davis Riley were they shot 65 on the final day, and then in particular on the back nine they birdied 4 of the last 6 holes. And they finished quite a bit ahead of all the lead groups. So they were probably about 45 minutes to an hour finished while the leaders were still on the course. So they put up the score. Well, the score they put up was 2 strokes ahead, and then nobody could catch them coming down the stretch. And the closest team to that was Adam Hadwin and Nick Taylor. And they shot 28 under par. They did have 7 consecutive birdies. So it's not like they played bad. They just couldn't overcome the great play of Hardy and Riley. So along with the win for Hardy and Riley, it is their first PGA Tour win. So some people can talk some smack and say, oh, it was a team event or whatever. Regardless, they get the win. They get their first PGA Tour win. They get the 2-year exemption onto the tour. They get to go to the Tour Championship Series. The players, so all the good things that come along with winning a PGA tournament. So congratulations to them. If you listened in last week, my pick was Harris English and Tom Hoge, and they were doing pretty well until the final round, and then they fell off, so I was incorrect. And then just a couple other notable teams was Wyndham, Clark, and Beau Hossler. And they were the lead group going into Sunday, but they bogeyed a couple early and really were never able to recover. And then last year's champions were Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele, and they couldn't really ever get it going either, but they were there. They were 26 under, so it's not like they played horribly. So they were still there. This week we are in Mexico for the Mexico Open, and it's not an elevated event. However, the number 1 player in the world, Jon Rahm, is playing in the tournament. And then the next highest ranked player below Rahm is Tony Finau. I think he's 16 or 17 at this point in time. So the field is not the typical stacked field you would see for an elevated PGA Tour event. But again, some of these guys have never won before. They're trying to, get higher status on the tour, get invited to the elevated events in the future, have an opportunity here. So this is a good opportunity for them. And a lot of times, again, some commentators talk some smack as far as like when these lower ranked players win a tournament where the top ranked players are not there, as if there's they're throwing some shade on it, like, oh, they won, but they didn't win at an elevated event. Whatever, they won. And I guess if someone wins that's, not in the top 50, well, they technically beat Rahm, who's the number 1 player in the world. So you can't throw any shade on that. So that's that. And then the following week is an elevated event, which will be the Wells Fargo. So full PGA Tour field there. The final kind of piece of PGA news is Tiger. Tiger is having his ankle fused together. Basically, they're connecting one of the bones, his lower leg bone, to his ankle bone, fusing it together. So he will not have the arthritis and the pain. So we'll see how he recovers from that and if he's able to play again, compete again, and all of that. Let's move on to the LIV Golf. And LIV had an event this past week in Australia, and it was quite the event. They definitely did an event in an area that was starved/hungry for golf. And so a lot of fans turned out and got to see some of the best players in the world. And one of the things that LIV has done, they played in Saudi Arabia, they played in Mexico and Mayakoba, and I think this is the third event this year, and this one was in Australia. And there's quite a bit of difference in the venues as far as, the excitement and the crowd. And it was something I mentioned last week, can they get down to Australia or a foreign country and really, drum up some interest in the product? And I believe that's kind of their biggest room for growth, is to get into these countries that don't necessarily have high status PGA Tour events and see if they can really turn them out. And they certainly were able to at this one. Saudi and Mayakoba, they had pretty small crowds there, but this one they had a huge crowd. And they made this 12th hole, the par 3. They built a whole hospitality tents and everything around it, and they called it the watering hole. They had a DJ on the hole. Brooks Koepka's brother, his name is Chase Koepka, had a hole-in-one. I don't know, some DJ was running around there trying to get people to take shots out of a shoe, and it was generally just a party scene, something you'd expect to see at the Waste Management Open, but not quite as big. But nonetheless, a success, and people seemed to really enjoy themselves. The winner of the event was Taylor Gooch, and he shot back-to-back 62s. He had a 10-stroke lead going into the final round. He did stumble a little bit, but ultimately walked through everybody and wins $4 million. And then in the team event, the four aces won the team event. And the interesting thing about this is that the four aces is Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, Pat Perez, and Peter Uilhen. They all finished within the top 10. So they had a really good performance. And this guy, Peter Uilhen, I keep seeing his name kind of at the top of the LIV board. So he's a good member of that team. The next thing I will talk about in relation to LIV, and it kind of involves the PGA Tour as well, is the Ryder Cup team status. And there was a lot of talk of, none of the players that join LIV were going to be able to play in the Ryder Cup, but it turns out they may be able to. It's they could be a captain's pick. And then it actually turns out on the PGA Tour that the guys that join LIV still are members of the PGA Tour until through June of this year. And then that means they've paid their dues. If they paid their dues last year, then they're members. And then they'll expire in June, and then they have a 1 year, I guess, they call it reserve status. So you have a 1 year period that if your dues expire, that you could, I guess, re-up them. So all those players technically could be chosen for the Ryder Cup by Zach Johnson. They'd have to be a captain's pick, but that is how that goes. So there is still some outside chance that Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, again, he's been playing good. The last three events, he played good in the LIV event. He played great at the Masters, and then he just played good again this weekend at the LIV event. So we shall see. Not the most popular guy in the world, but I don't know how the other players feel about him or Zach Johnson feels about him, but I like him, so whatever. And then this week for LIV, they are in Sentosa Golf Club, which is in Singapore. So we'll see what kind of crowds show up for them for that, and if they can kind of keep building this international interest in the product. And that's where I think the most room for growth is with them. It's not necessarily in America, in Orlando, or Tucson for that matter, but perhaps this Australia event shows that they can really get some eyeballs on the product. And then the final thing that's funny about LIV, and golf news that came out this week is that apparently Will Ferrell is going to be in a television show about the formation of a third golf league or something, a rival golf league. And I don't know, maybe it'll be loosely based on Ted Lasso. And obviously it's going to be a comedy if Will Ferrell's involved in it. So that's something to look forward to. And that is This Week in Golf. Hey, it's Jeremy Callahan, and thanks for listening to This Week in Golf. Make sure and hit subscribe so you can get all the latest news and analysis from Golf BPM.